Watermelon. Ready for this? It's going. Welcome back to the Common Sense Podcast, where we have real conversations around the money moves of successful Black entrepreneurs. From their financial wins, setbacks, and everything in between, we love to hear about their journeys and spread knowledge so that others can learn and be inspired. I'm your host, Ayo Idowu, and today I'm very excited to have restaurateur, entrepreneur, and overall problem solver, Kamal Mohamed. Kamal, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Today.
Thank you for having me. It's been, I know we've been talking about doing this for a little while, so I'm excited to finally do this with you.
I'm very excited to have you as well.
Yeah.
Not only because I'm a passionate food guy, not even a foodie, I just eat a lot.
Yeah.
But it's always interesting to hear about the different industries a lot of our Black entrepreneurs are in. And we haven't had anybody that owns a restaurant or a plethora of restaurants. So thank you, sir.
Yeah. No, it's Minneapolis is an interesting place to own a restaurant. We'll get into that a little bit more, but yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's start here. I gave you a quick intro, right?
Yeah.
I know it doesn't nearly do it justice. So let me ask you, who is Kamal Mohamed and what do you do?
That's a great question. So, that has changed for me over the years. I think where I'm at right now is a journey that I started back in 2020. So I moved back during the pandemic to help out my family transition from the Mediterranean food trucks, because at the time it had a lot of SKUs, which just means a lot of menu items you got to manage, a lot of things that can go bad. And with the uncertainty of the market, came back and put out the idea to do something really simple. So living out in California, saw In-N-Out, 3 menu items. They had, everything down on the menu. So we started Nashville Coop, which was essentially just a hot chicken concept with Ethiopian spices. And that took off. And I was like, man, I'm really enjoying this restaurant thing. And so once I helped my family do that, the guys from Famous Dave's,
Dave himself?
Not Dave himself, but they're owners of Famous Dave's. They own JL Beers in Northeast Minneapolis.
Okay,
So I was connected to them to, mutual friends, Hamza and Nabil.
Okay.
They're like, hey, there's a spot that's open and they want you to take over it. So that's what I did. So, one thing led to another, and solving one issue to another issue got us to where we're at today.
So Nashville Coop, and then as well as the Spotted Jail Beers, which is called
StepChld.
Okay.
Yep. So StepChild's been around for 3 years. We've won top 50 best restaurants for the last 2 years. So, and then recently opened up Parcelle as well, on the same block. So it wasn't the plan from the beginning to, take over an entire block, but it just naturally progressed that way because we were focused on solving one problem at a time.
Okay, so let's talk more about the plan from the beginning.
Yeah.
What's your background? How'd you get started?
Yeah.
Like a corporate employee that jumped into restaurateur?
So I graduated from University of St. Thomas in 2012. And at the time I applied to go work at General Mills, Target, all the corporate, Fortune 500 companies that we have here in the Twin Cities and Chicago. None of those worked out for me. So it wasn't really a plan of being like, I'm always going to be an entrepreneur. A part of it was I didn't really have, and I think a lot of Black entrepreneurs can attest to this, it's hard to get your foot in the door, even though I had the credentials and whatnot. And so I'm looking at my peers going, okay, they're getting multiple job offers, and then I'm kind of on the outside looking in. So
you just weren't landing job offers? Is that what it was?
Yeah, no, I wasn't
getting the jobs you wanted specifically.
I was always interested in entrepreneurship, but I wasn't thinking that I was going to be an entrepreneur right away. I was more thinking of getting into it from get into corporate America, learn, and then get out, do my own thing, do that for 10 years. That was the original plan. So when that didn't work out, I was actually a paraprofessional. I worked with kids at a school called CPE in St. Paul.
Okay.
And then once I got off work, I would go home and I worked on a festival that I started called the Minnesota Food Truck Festival, which, by the way, after the first year, the second year was 25,000 people. First year was 5,000. And then by our third year was 40,000. And I sold that off before moving to San Francisco. So that was one of those things where I would work during the day, come home, and then work on, that concept. And I try to tell a lot of my friends who want to get into the entrepreneurship world, if you get off your main job and then you're going to go home to work on your other thing, and that doesn't sound exciting, then you're working on the wrong thing.
Period.
So it has to be something where I was, I'm getting off, kids are getting on the bus to go home 3:30. I'm driving home. I'm already thinking about my idea. I'm excited to work on it. So it wasn't just like one of those things where I'm like, I got to do this so I was excited to put on, an event, a festival that I thought was going to do really well.
Yeah.
And so at the time, food trucks were a new thing in Minneapolis, but nobody was putting on a festival for food trucks. And that first year was a absolute disaster. And so
what made it so bad if there's 5,000 people?
We have 5,000,
like a success.
But we were only ready for 2,000 people. So we had lines out the door. People were pissed. I mean, we had it was on the front page of Star Tribune the next day that said, "Fair leaves a sour taste in people's mouths." Oh, wow. It was really bad.
Bro, I would have walked up to the Star and found out who wrote
it. Yeah. So
like that's crazy.
But what happened with that though was we had so many people start to follow us on Instagram because of the disaster, and like social media wasn't as big at the time, thankfully, because then you would have got really torched. And that was like a pivotal moment for me because I was like, well, I wanted to quit. I was like, I wasn't ready for this entrepreneurship thing. Yeah. So I threw myself into the fire, and I didn't have the execution and the operations in place to really make it happen. And so, but after that though, I kind of sat down, a month later, I sat down and I was like, okay, what are all the things that went wrong? And I went back to some of the guys that I did the festival with. I'm like, I think I want to do that again. And they're like, are you out of your mind? Yeah. Because all the food trucks, we have food trucks from Iowa and Wisconsin call us. They're like, yo, we want to come to your event next year. When is it going to happen? Believe it or not, Billy Sushi came in. He had it was called like Sushi Fix at the time. And he almost dropped out the day before because he's like, hey man, you already have 10 food trucks out there. I go to Grand Ole Day. And I was like, look, all these other events, you're not the main focus. This is a foodie focus. And at the time, the word foodie didn't even make sense to a lot of the food trucks. And I was like, please show up. And I remember I was in the line trying to go through people, trying to let them in through the door, just making sure we had enough space. And I get a tap on my shoulder. I turn around, it was Billy. I'm like, Billy, what's up? And he's like, we're out. I'm like, it was literally, you can ask him the story. It was 15 minutes. 15 minutes in, he was out. And he was like, sorry, man, I didn't know it was going to be this popular. And I'm thinking to myself, I told you it was going to be popular,
But you're like, I didn't know either.
I didn't know either. I knew it was going to be popular. I didn't think it was going to be that popular, And so it was one of those things where I was like, well, our problem was that it was too successful too fast, right? Mm-hmm. It was one of those, as a young eager entrepreneur, you try to, you're only seeing the numbers and excitement for how many people could I fit through the door versus proper execution. Yeah. And so having that punch in the face really early on helped me understand to put my focus, 80% of my focus on operations and execution and only 20% on marketing where I did it the opposite way before.
Which I get that too, right?
Yeah.
I too have thrown events, and the marketing is the scariest part. It doesn't matter what you do if nobody's there, right? So I feel like on year one of anything, you're putting a lot of execution on marketing, which I don't know, for some would say that is the right idea. For others would say, no, you got to make sure like once people get in the house, like the ceilings and walls, right? Yeah. So, what'd you learn from that experience? I mean, it also tells me though into your restaurant life.
Well, execution is also great marketing, right? Right. If somebody comes in and they have a great experience, they're going to go tell somebody else. And so, I think a lot of times you undervalue the marketing that is word of mouth, and that experience makes a huge difference. So, spending time on execution and the right type of operations and making sure the clientele has good experience ensures, I think, good marketing. And I've used that mistake from day one to ensure how I open up restaurants now. So what a lot of restaurateurs do is they talk about their restaurant like 9 months before they open it. They put a lot of pressure on when to open it. They set a date, and more times than not, it doesn't go to plan on that date because so many things go wrong. So I try to not to do a lot of marketing before things open. So Parcelle,
interesting.
That we opened in end of January, beginning of February. I didn't do much marketing for it at all, and it was just kind of like word of mouth because I wanted my staff to get the execution down. I wanted them to be like, you have to be able to handle 10 people before you can handle 100 or 1,000. And then the first month was kind of slow, so I was starting to get worried. I'm like, oh, maybe I should have done marketing. But looking back, I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't, because a few of the right TikTokers and influencers came in. They had a great experience. At the time, Allie, who walked up to one of the tables and she like made sure that they were doing okay. So the customer service was on par. The girl had like over 50,000 followers on TikTok. She posted how much she loved it. And then from that moment on, other ones came on and they talked about it. So it was just one of those things where execution, operation, I think first and foremost is really important, especially for young entrepreneurs coming out. And a lot of Black entrepreneurs only have one shot to get it right. And so it's important that we focus on the right things.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on that a little bit later, the execution and operation. I know you had some experience in the startup world before you got into
the restaurants.
The restaurant business. Tell us about that, and then how did that kind of help propel you into where you're at now?
Yeah, so after Food Truck Fair was sold, I moved to San Francisco to start Juice Bot. And that's like a juice bar inside of a vending machine. That itself could be its own segment. It took us about a year to even get things off the ground.
Yeah.
One thing we didn't realize was like, oh yeah, we sold, we sold Food Truck Fair, and I was like, man, this is a lot of money. This is going to last us a long time. Well, in San Francisco, when rent is $5,000 a month in 2013.
That's probably cheap compared to what it is now.
It was, because it was a studio apartment with 3 guys, and so we
smelled amazing.
Luckily we were pretty clean, but we had bunk beds, and then we had a little walk-in closet that was like, when you got the chance to sleep in the walk-in closet, it was great. So there was a lot of sacrifices. You know, you couldn't even go on a date, one, because you can't afford to go on a date, but two, like, what are you going to say? Like, come over to my, studio apartment that I share with 3 other guys, in a bunk bed to get the startup off the ground. So
that'd be a perfect excuse for me to not date, because I'm already not getting chosen. Oh, man, I couldn't easily. I live in a bunk bed in the closet.
And then so about a year in, we had all these like prototype kiosks that we were doing pop-ups with it, like farmers markets and whatnot. So we ran out of money. So then at the time it was like, okay, do we move back to Minneapolis, or what do we do? And at the time, Uber and Lyft launched in the Bay Area, and they were giving out like crazy incentives. So we got a car on a lease, and it was the 3 of us, and we would all do like 5 or 6 hour shifts. So I was making like $1,400 a week driving Uber and Lyft because of all the incentives. So we would all pull in and say, cool, rent is this much, everybody put in this much, and then the rest is yours. But by the time you had any part of it left over, cell phone bill, whatever else, you really didn't have time to do anything else, which was great, than to drive and to work. But what was interesting about that is, because when that moment happened, if we would have given up, then I don't know where we'd be right now. But because we didn't give up, and we didn't have the ego, we're like, I'm going to drive. I mean, I remember even some St. Thomas kids that I picked up, driving. They're like, what are you doing driving? And I'm like, I'm trying to figure it out, making ends meet. But LJ picked up Jack Dorsey from Twitter.
LJ's your partner, correct?
Yep, he was my business partner. He picked up Jack Dorsey from Twitter.
Wow.
And he had an 1.5-hour ride with him to the airport.
Picking his brain. And
not only picking his, but kind of giving him the elevator pitch. You're in the room with the founder of Twitter, hot 2013, and you're pitching him. And then a few weeks later, we get a call. We're in Twitter, and then we get a write up on the Business Insider. So that was like our first little break. So like, okay, so this thing that we were using to survive is also helping us open up little cracks of doors along the way.
Yeah.
And then Eric, my other business partner, picked up somebody from another startup called 23andMe, and then on that ride sold them on the idea, and then we put one in there. And so we were going through putting these in different corporate cafeterias, And then finally I picked up this family, this like really health nut family out of Southern California. You know, his kids were on the spectrum, and they were the type, family that would make sure like their water was like triple time filtered. And so I'm telling him about the startup, gave him my card. And long story short, we went back and forth with his VC, his venture capital group. And after a year of going back and forth, driving, doing all that stuff, in the meantime, we're negotiating. So I'm picking somebody up, dropping them off, and then an hour later, meeting up at a coffee shop to negotiate a $3 million deal. So after a year of going back and forth, we raised 3.5, and that allowed us to stop driving, to start building our team. So a lot of times it's like, the sacrifice is there, and you don't really know. We didn't know if we were going to stop driving after a year or 2 years, whatever, but it was just like, we really believe in this, and we're going to put everything it takes to like make it happen. And when you kind of do that, the universe kind of figures out a way to get out of your way. But he's going down this way.
Yeah.
We're going to make that happen.
So did that, I mean, I didn't even know that. That's a crazy story.
Yeah.
Did that help kind of set the tone for like the rest of your entrepreneurship journey? Just like, I mean, people talk about getting out the mud, but that's a mud right there. Like, you really living on top of two other men.
Yeah.
And then sharing a car that you're Ubering.
And, it's funny. And I don't know how deep we can get into it, but, I just remember now, one of the people I picked up, why am I forgetting his name? We were at his party at the Timberwolves, at the T-Wolves. He put on.
Trevor Rozier.
No, not Trevor.
Okay.
Ali was there. It was when Jazz.
Jenga. Oh, really?
Yeah, he was working at Amazon. And I remember it was like on the tail end of me driving Uber. He was one of the last people I picked up. And, and it's kind of, it's one of those things where you do have to keep your ego in check because.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Somebody I graduated with is at Amazon doing amazing things. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like 401k, all that. And here I am driving, like chasing a dream. And you're like, is it going to happen for me?
Yeah.
Like at what point do you kind of throw the towel in? And it's hard to say. A part of it is gut. A part of it is like calculation. We felt like the product and the idea was good enough.
Yeah.
It just needed a chance to be in front of the right person. So especially being, a Black entrepreneur, you don't have as many doors open to you. So you're kind of forcing a lot of those doors to open up and be like, I'm going to just show up. And so you got to let me in.
That's crazy. I didn't know that story, and that's pretty cool. I feel like that would definitely set the tone. The ego's a big thing, right? Like, imagine graduating from this very expensive liberal arts college and picking up some of your classmates that are doing extremely well, right?
Yeah.
But I feel one of the things about being an entrepreneur is knowing that your path isn't everybody else's path.
Yeah.
And that your success path won't look like this. It might look like this. It might look like this. Or it might look like this and then down, right?
Yeah. No path, regardless of what industry, looks like this.
Yeah.
All of it is waves. So that's why, it sounds cliche, and I think, especially coming from like African.
Ahead, corn it up, baby. But
even coming from like an African background, with parents just being like, you got to be a doctor, you got to be a lawyer, you got to be, you kind of realize like it's not going to be steady at all for you, and you have to be able to weather the storm through all that and realize that your vision is worth sacrificing for.
That's what's up, man. Let's talk about, so you never had a job out of school. You never did the corporate thing?
Yeah. I mean, I'm telling you, I didn't, for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I have tried, and I've saved every rejection. I have an email that just saves all my rejection letters.
That's pretty cool.
Just so like, because I think people think I'm
space.
because people think I'm like joking when I tell them like I've tried name a company I've tried,
which is insane now, because I feel like any company would love to have you now. But when did you know you want to be an entrepreneur? Like, when did that click? Like, when you're like, I'm gonna, like, obviously you kind of went into the path, or let's not say the when, because you kind of told us, but like, how about how? Like, how did you know like?
I mean, that's a really good question.
I like taking ideas and actually turning them into something.
Yeah, that's a really good. I think that's where a lot of times it's the title of saying like I'm an entrepreneur. I don't even talk about it like that. I don't think about it like that. It's more of I'm in an industry and I see a problem, and I'm like, I want to solve that problem. And then it just happens to turn into a business.
Mhm.
And so a lot of times you'll see the people that are great entrepreneurs, they're not going into it going, okay, well, if I take this product and I sell it for this much, I'm going to make that much.
Mhm.
It's like, well, whose problem are you solving?
Yeah.
Because if you love the class, you're naturally going to get an A because you're going to naturally study, right? But if you go in a class like, oh, I need to get an A in that class, but you don't really care about that class, one, you're going to be miserable. And two, more likely than not, you're probably going to skate away with a B.
That was all my classes, by the way. There was not many classes I was very passionate about. I'm just trying to get this A.
Yeah, and that's why it's important to do what you love, because you're not going to outwork somebody who loves what they do.
Yeah.
So any industry you go into,
Period.
just think,
I love that.
you just know that somebody else is in that same industry, finance,
Yeah.
doctor, whatever it is. If somebody loves that industry more than you do, or whatever they're solving for, they're going to beat you in that. And so with entrepreneurship, there's only space for like a few winners, right?
Yeah.
In most categories. So,
Yeah.
and if you're like, do I think I'm, the top X people
Mhm.
in my city, in my country,
Yeah.
in the world to do it? Then, and if you don't love it, it's not because you're not smart, but it's like you're not going to outwork
Yeah.
that person.
What makes you a winner in your spaces? Because you've had a lot of success in a lot of different spaces.
I think I'm intrinsically motivated to solve the problem that I find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't find something interesting, I'm not going to spend my time on it. If I find something interesting, I'm going to solve it regardless of if it makes money or not. And so, yeah, you find this balance where, and what happens a lot of times, like when I start to grow in an industry, certain investors will come in and be like, oh, well, I got this for you. I got that for you. But what happens in my 20s that I now know in my 30s is that in my 20s, I was like, well, I didn't think about, well, where is this money coming from? And is all money good money? And it's not. Because if an investor, if you're thinking, I'm gonna create this over the next 10 years, and an investor is expecting a return in 2 years, even if you're like, I don't need that money, that's just gonna create a headache for you, compounded
in 2 years.
in
Yeah.
2 years. And so it's really important that you find
Mhm.
that they are aligned with your vision.
Yeah.
So that's why when people look at Jeff Bezos and they're like, oh my God, he's such a genius. I'm like, what Jeff Bezos did better than most entrepreneurs is he helped his investors realize you're not going to see anything back for 20 years. But when you do, you're going to be really happy. And if you're down for the long ride for what you're putting on with me,
Mhm.
then you're good to go. And so did a lot of people pull out? Absolutely. But the ones that have stayed in or even doubled down, they may not have the same size yacht, but
Yeah.
they're very comfortable.
Yeah.
So vision matters, patience matters. And for a lot of young entrepreneurs, the
Yeah.
patience is one of the hardest things to learn.
That talks about the maturation of business for sure.
100%.
I love that you said that not every dollar is your dollar.
Yeah.
I think that was a lesson I definitely had to learn the hard
Yeah.
way. I don't know. It's cool when you start generating money.
Yeah.
It's cool to just see how much you can do. And
Yeah.
somebody else on the season made a comment saying, I would drop dollars picking up quarters, right?
Yeah.
And I think that resonates huge with me.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yeah, I'll tell him you said that.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? That was me. I said it. Just tell me how great it was. So I want to get it a little bit into personal finances.
Yeah.
Right? We know that people that work for big companies get a 401k, get like matches, get all this stuff. Usually have a steady income stream.
Yeah.
They're not opening up restaurants for 9 months before they even see a dollar come in.
Right.
How are you able to handle that? And what are some maybe tips you have for other folks getting into the restaurant business?
Yeah, that's for me, the most important thing is knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And in terms of like my path, for a lot of times, I'm in that season of life where I'm doubling down on what I'm doing because I understand my lane and I know what I'm building. And so for that reason, I'm like, well, I could put in a 401k. I could do that. And to a certain extent, I'll do a little bit of that, but majority of it, I'm doubling down in building more restaurants. And then for me, that makes sense the most to me, right? But if you're working a 9 to 5 at a Fortune 500
Right.
company and you're not maximizing all that money
Right.
towards your savings, then it doesn't make, especially because a lot of the companies match it as well. So I think it's great to talk to somebody who understands finances, but then also understanding like what is your strategy. So my strategy is between now until 36, 37. Every year I'm just doubling down. So my plan is to open up 1 or 2 restaurants a year for the next 4 years. And then once that's done, I'm planning on turning around and reducing risks, right? Because now restaurants are risky, but I can take that risk of where I'm at in life. As time goes and you're putting more into family, child planning, you need to reduce that risk to ensure that you're more diversified.
Yeah.
So it's younger, you can take more risk.
Yeah.
Older, you got to be more diverse.
So with that being said, doubling down, basically taking like your profit and reinvesting it to generate more revenue or even equity, let's say. I mean, do you are you in that time, because it's not guaranteed you're gonna make it to 37, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
Do you make sure you're taking advantage of like life insurance, that just in case you don't get to that point?
And that's the first thing that one of the first things I've got even this year, to be honest, is like I've taken health insurance seriously, life insurance, all that. So those things are really important, and I think insurance in general, like all my businesses, I make sure every insurance that there is take out on restaurants, I take out. So just because I take risk does not mean that I don't have insurance.
And
I think
they're hedged,
the higher the risk, the more insurance I have, just because, yes, if it goes down, what if? Then you have to plan for the worst case scenario.
Yeah, I work with a lot of business owner clients and athletes as well. And it's funny because entrepreneurs, athletes are taught from a young age to bet on themselves, right? And if you're betting on yourself too much, you can definitely find yourself in a place where you're ass out. Right. But just because you bet on yourself doesn't mean you can't still hedge just in case, right? You can still siphon stuff out. And I love when people talk about like, I'm going all out, but I'm also putting some sort of safety net so that if I do fall, which I don't plan on doing, but if I do fall, I'm not hitting the ground. I'm going to land here instead.
100%. And it's like playing football without a helmet. Like, you go all out in the field, but you have to have insurance on.
Thank you.
So
no, 100%. So let's talk about business finances. Like restaurants get a really bad rap, as far as just like they're risky. 3% of restaurants succeed. All this stuff, like just from an investor perspective, like I'm like, I would never put money into a restaurant. Even when I was playing football, people said, don't ever put your money into a restaurant. And I'm just like, but there's so many restaurants out there. So like, how are people able to overcome that? Is that as true as it is? And how are you able to like keep everything intact?
A big part of that goes back to, again, saying know thyself. So a lot of people look at restaurants as like just one block, right? And within that block, you have a lot of people that are financially illiterate, I would say. So you have a lot of people who are amazing chefs. I mean, you go over to their house, and I think they could outcook me every day to Sunday.
Right. Not my house.
But but a lot of that you realize, like, once I opened up restaurants, I actually cooked the least amount, and because I'm focused on my P&Ls, I'm focused on customer service. I'm focused on, future planning. So a lot of that comes down to, it's like, well, people think restaurants, they think food. No, I think it's a business that happens to sell food. So, there's a lot of, and I also think a lot of restaurateurs, either they come from like an older generation or, an immigrant, or maybe they haven't taken the correct financial classes to ensure. So, I use software that tells me stuff in real time, what my food margins are, so I get, and for example, an invoice comes in, the invoice is scanned in, and based on my recipes, it takes that and says, okay, you're using 6 ounces of, Wagyu ground beef in your burger. Okay, well, this week the prices of beef have gone up by 5%, and now it's going to give me a real-time cost of that. So I'm like, okay, could I eat that cost this week? Maybe. But if I don't want to, I need to know real time what my costs are, so that I can put on my menu what that is. So for most restaurants, you want your food to be less than 30%. But how do you know your food is
less than 30% what?
Of your price? So like, let's say if I sell you something for $10, then my cost for that food can't be more than
$3.
yeah, it can't be because my labor is going to be $4, right? I got to pay for rent, insurance, towels, electricity.
Yeah.
So when all that stuff comes in, those margins really matter. So when you're playing a game of inches, the details matter even more, and that I think is the difference between a restaurateur and a chef.
Do you know how did you learn that stuff? And then on top of that, my question is, you obviously network with a lot of people that own restaurants.
Right.
Do you feel like people lack that, and that's why you've been so successful and
not
really a part of that 3%
When
statistic?
I got back to Minneapolis, the restaurant industry is really small. Everybody knows everybody. Like we all talk in the same group thread, and they're willing to share so much information. And so if I don't know something, and it goes back to even me driving Uber, like once you separate yourself from your ego, it's so much easier to learn. Like I've gone to chefs and like, what do you do for food cost? What do you do for, and I'm asking Gavin Kaysen, at Sweeney's Table. I'm like, who's the most successful chef I know around here? Cool. I'm gonna ask him. And he, replied back, hey, you want to keep your food costs at this percentage. I'm gonna ask another chef. Okay. And then I'm gonna figure out what works for me. He might be okay with 35%. For me, I might be like, I need it at 30%. So trying to really remove a lot of ego, and people want to help you too. I remember when I got in the industry, like I grew up cooking a lot of East African food. I didn't even know how to make pickles, if I'm being honest, right?
I don't know how you make pickles either, but.
And so, I was doing the Vikings were like, hey, we want you to like make a burger for our event. And so I used to just like buy pickles off the shelf. We make our own patties and buns or whatever. And I was like, okay, who do I want to work with? So then I reached out to Gavin. I was like, yo, like I have this opportunity. You want to work with me on this? And I knew I would have to split some of the profits with him, but it also gave me a reason to pick his brain, because I wasn't just coming in and like just taking. And so by coming in and saying, I have this opportunity, would you like a piece of that? It gave me access to him more than, let's say, the average chef. So a lot of times people think networking is like, you go around and be like, hi, I'm Ayo, yo, yo, yo. And it's like, no, networking is, before I go to an event, I know who's going to be there.
Yeah.
And when I know who's going to be there, and if I want to work with them, I go and read about them, and I try to figure out what problems they're going through. Because right now with the internet, you should find out more information than we did 10 years ago, right? So I go in there and say, hey, Ayo, I see that you're starting this podcast. I'm a really good sound mixer, and I'm good at, helping companies like yours build on TikTok. I would love the opportunity to work with you. Like, oh, wow, this guy knows what I'm working on, the issues that I'm facing, and he's already talking about providing me solutions.
Yeah.
That person is going to stand out to you than everybody else who gave you a business card. So networking is not about you.
Right.
Networking is, how are you going to solve somebody else's problem that you want to learn from in order to grow within their industry.
Right.
And so you have to be in a position to provide something.
Yeah. It's like an equal exchange barter. Well, maybe not equal, but it's some sort of barter.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think you talked a little bit about entrepreneurship being 20s versus 30s. I thought that was super interesting. So let's tag back on that. How do you find that different then versus now? And then restaurant, it sounds like, it feels like something you got to be pretty active in.
Yeah.
At what point, do you have a point where it's like you can really remove yourself from restaurants? Is there an end game of selling? Like, let's talk about the differences of 20s and 30s.
Well, anything that you're doing, if the goal is to completely remove yourself, again, that may not be the right industry for you, right? So
explain that, why you say that.
So let's look at, for example, Sam Walton, right, founder of Walmart. He would talk about like, we're a team. And, when he first started out, he didn't like sleep in nice hotels or whatever else. Like he slept in the same hotels that his team slept in. So what he said he believed in. He would wake up at like 2:30 a.m. in the morning and go to the loading dock, bring some donuts and say, what problems are you guys facing? Or sometimes would hop on a truck, go 100 miles to see how they receive product, to see what issues are there. So you have to love what you're doing to an extent where that doesn't feel like work to you. You want to do those things, right? Because for you, winning and growing is as fun as like going out, if not more, right? So are there things that I don't like to do? I don't like to sit in front of a computer. I don't want to sit there and do the paperwork. So what I don't like to do, I want to delegate out. But the things that I love to do, which is I answer the phone at Parcelle because I want to know what questions are coming up. I want to know what my customer is thinking about because that's my only source of revenue. So whatever issues if I'm like, okay, 5 customers are asking the same question this week, that's a problem I need to solve. I'm going to put my energy to do that. So what I need to do is I need to have the right team with me to do the things I don't love to do so that I can be obsessed to focus on the things that really make the needle move within the company. So I don't know. Could I delegate out customer service? Yes, but not.
You feel like there's benefit in getting that information in real time. And then even them hearing from the owner.
Yeah.
I feel like people would appreciate that.
Yeah.
And maybe have a little more leniency when they know it's the owner answering questions. Because I don't know, in my mind, if I'm working with a business and I get reached out by the owner, I either feel really important or it's like, hey, they're not a big conglomerate with bad supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Let me give them a little bit of grace.
It gives me an immense amount of high to know that when I see a customer and I've connected with them and then they later go on like Google or Yelp and like, hey, I met the owner. He was super cool. Really take care of us, went above and beyond.
Yeah.
But it also shows your staff that you are not beneath that.
Right.
You're not beneath when something spills that you grab a mop to do that because how am I going to ask you to do that if I'm not going to do that? Yeah. And so team is so important. And one thing I didn't realize in my 20s is I didn't know how to delegate what I didn't like to do because I was like, everything, I have to make every decision.
Yeah, I think we're similar in that sense.
Yeah, which took away from me focusing on the most important decisions, right? And so...
And the energy was probably drained by the time those decisions were time to be made, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so delegating, and people think, well, delegating means like you're just going to sit in the Bahamas and be on your laptop. And it's like, there should be time for taking vacation and enjoying yourself and whatever else. But you want to delegate so that you can focus on the most important things that move your business, not to do any work. I'm like, then shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Go get a 9 to 5.
Right. So I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you can delegate your butt off and make entrepreneur money, like more power to you.
Yeah,
but you're just saying the likelihood is probably.
Yeah, but also if I delegate, what I would do is like. If I go on vacation for more than a week, I'm going to start to get bored. That's just like that's what I'm saying. It's so important to know yourself.
I'll find something to do.
Right. And so if I delegated every single task at all of my restaurants, I'm going to go open up more restaurants or I'm going to go start another startup. So it's just like some people just have that itch and I don't know if it was a learned thing or whatever, but so yes, I think in a restaurant you do have to be very hands-on, and that's an industry where a lot of people are like, oh, like, what do you think about me getting in the restaurant industry? I'm like, I'm not even trying to like block you from getting into this industry. I'm just telling you, if you don't want to work 7 days a week, this is not the industry to get into.
Let me get a tip or like a mistake you made that you want to make sure young restaurateurs don't, that you didn't talk about already. But if you could look into the camera and just be like, what's one thing that like Kamal Mohamed is telling you, like,
if you're going to open up a restaurant, don't regress to the mean, which means don't go out there and open what everybody else is opening. So when I first got here, people were like, you're going to open up a concept that only serves one type of food, just chicken? I'm like, well, we'll have some fries too. But, but what we did though is I'm like, we're going to make the best hot chicken in Minnesota. Like, we're not going to give you the second best, whatever. Like, that's going to be our sole focus. And so because we were so focused on doing that really well, when you were craving that product, you came to us. Yeah. Right. And so
you call me.
When this is what you need, you call me. And so now, but doing that with my brother, I was like, I'm not a big fan of like fried chicken. That's just like not my lane. I was doing, like a cold pressed juice company.
So you were selling fried chicken, but you weren't a fried chicken fan.
No, but I can execute in terms of, building operations in place because my family, they're great chefs too. They can create great recipes and spices and whatever else. And so my job was just to kind of create a brand
Yeah.
and a place for them to succeed. And I'm so happy we did that together. But I also learned a lot from that. So when I was opening up Parcelle, I was like, we're not going to just make any smoothies. Like we make our own dates in house, our own coconut milk, our own almond milk. Like it's like, it's the Prada of
Yeah.
smoothies. Like it's the best of the best. And so,
Yeah.
and so some people come in and they're like, $15 smoothie, that's not for me. And I'm like, okay, but you're not my customer.
Right. This
So
ain't for you. You're exactly right. This
yeah,
is not for you.
this is not for you. And so any idea that I work on, with the exception of StepChld, I have a very singular focus on whatever item I'm bringing out. It's going to be the best version of that. So don't regress to the mean. Don't fall into the nobody land where
Right.
nobody knows who you are.
Right.
And if you're going to make boba tea, make the best goddamn boba tea in your city, and you will always have a line. So be the best in your category. It could be a lollipop. Doesn't matter. Whatever that category is, win in that category, and that opens, like, I have more people calling me to say, hey, I have a spot for you. I'll give you this capital to open up this restaurant than I can handle at one time. Like a few years ago, if I would have told myself that this was going to be the case, I'd be like, no way. Like that's a dream come true. So just being patient and just focusing on doing one thing at its best version possible.
So stay your lane and do
Stay in
it
your
well
lane
and scale it.
and
do
be
you
the
ever feel
best
like
one.
Do you ever feel like there's a point where you do something so well that you finally have time to maybe derivative off, like burger and fries, and I'm like, you know what? No, I might throw a hot dog on the menu or a fish sandwich, but don't go into it.
Yeah, or why don't you go open up another spot that just focuses on fish sandwiches?
Right.
And now you have another business with more revenue in a different spot. So
I can already tell how you think.
Yeah.
So before we get out, man, this has been awesome. One question I definitely want to ask you is what is Kamal up to now?
Yeah.
Because you've been back home, 4 years now, 5 years?
Yeah.
And you've opened up 3 restaurants.
Yep.
And
yeah,
a food
so
truck festival and God knows what.
I have so right now we're working on StepChld. So if you look in Northeast, there's StepChld that was on one corner.
Yep.
And the other thing to add to what you were asking me previously just came to my mind is always try to get a corner restaurant. So my restaurants now, Parcelle's on one corner and then the other one is on the other corner. So right next to StepChld, we had a restaurant called Hyde, rest in peace. It was fun.
R.I.P. to Hyde.
Hyde was great.
Yeah.
So Hyde was a great idea in the wrong location. So Hyde would have killed it, but Northeast is not the clientele that wants nightclubs.
Right.
So StepChld is going to be right next to Hyde. So it'll be cocktail forward, but it's for if it's going to be for that consumer base that wants to drink between 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., maybe 12 a.m. on the weekend. So something chill, vibey, like date night. You're having a few great cocktails. And now we're going to do StepChld. Brought on my friend Bridget. She's amazing with cocktails. And I was like, I want to have the best cocktails in Northeast. Like when people in this neighborhood want to go out and get cocktails, where do they go? They're going to come here. And I think that will be a great complementary business to StepChld.
Let me know if you're hiring, man. I definitely want to come.
I mean,
mix up some drinks. I was actually mixing some drinks with some friends last night.
You have the personality to do anything well that's people facing.
But
there's no but. It's just more about I think you're similar to me where you have a lot of interest and it's kind of a curse at the same time where you could be doing XYZ, and so you kind of have to fight for that time back.
That's funny. Yeah.
And and then people say, well, money, time is money. Time is not money. Time is moving in one direction. It is the most limited asset that you have. Money comes and goes. You can build in different ways, but you have to protect your time. And if you don't love it, don't do it.
Yeah. Well, good luck with StepChld, man. This sounds super exciting. Congrats on all of your success up until this point.
Thank you so much.
And future success. Sounds like you're building a family there.
Yeah.
Which, even if this is not public knowledge, we're not going to release this for like a couple months, so it will be public by then.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If not, we can just cut this.
No, we're great. And we'll, we're working on some stuff. Hopefully downtown. That is going to be.
It's so dangerous down there.
Yeah, so it's going to be state of the art. And I think it's something, a lot of concepts downtown have been wanting to be like, well, no one's downtown. Well, the businesses of the past were expecting to just win off of the people that were already down there. And so I think the future downtown to me, like, it has to be a concept that brings people to downtown rather than expecting to take on the current crowd. So I'm excited, and hopefully that deal goes through. But if it does, it'll probably be the biggest thing I've ever worked on. And so I'll keep you updated on that. And it'll be
as of now,
fun.
you're 3 for 3. So if we're going by stats, it's going to kill it.
Might take a year off like Jordan, come back, maybe do another 3.
You going to play some baseball?
No.
You going to start selling socks or something like that?
Yeah. Just be like, I sucked at doing podcasts for a year.
We'll coach football.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Kamal, thanks for coming in. If you guys love what Kamal... Oh, my bad.
No,
if you guys love what Kamal had to say, please like, comment, and subscribe to McCullough Media. And we'll see you guys on the next episode of Common Sense.
Thank you for tuning in.
That was good. That was really good.